Okay, so Notion just launched a new feature, which is tables. They had inline tables only that were basically databases, but it didn't allow you to have any like spreadsheet functionality. And there is a time and a place, and not even spreadsheet, just simple tables. And so
Yeah, like a
the idea
display
is,
table.
yeah, and the idea is that there are times in a memo or in a document where you might want to use these. So I think right now we'll go through these, do some screen sharing, and walk through what they are and why they are important.
Okay, so this is what I guess Notion would consider to be an inline table, where it's not like something you would navigate to on its own, but it was the only thing that you could use to set up like, hey, we're going to have like a column and then value on the left or the right, kind of whatever it is. I guess to start, we can just sort of talk about, maybe use the priorities database as an example, where you've got a number of columns, and there's sort of like ways to like you notice down here, it's like very calculation based. I think that the intent with Notion was to allow for sort of data type verification. So like on this column, it's enforcing you to use a date. On the responsible individual side, it's enforcing you to tag a person. These are sort of like enumerated values. So you've only got one of a couple options here to choose from. And then specifically, you can sort of filter, like this actually already is like the active priorities database, where we've got a specific view of, hey, we need things where the project is not shipped or on hold. And so you can sort of set up views for these. It's very data oriented. And even at the bottom here, you can calculate like earliest date, latest date, the range of dates. Yeah. So it's very much like data manipulation. And I think even in some of these, you can put in formulas to sort of like use math, a lot like you would Excel-ish, to reference different cells in the database, and do stuff with them. So what Notion's done is created something called a simple table, which I think is just for display purposes. So this is a draft that I'm working on for the DRI process. And if you'll notice here, there's sort of like a functional area that we have, and then an owner that's tagged in. And this used to be a database. You can actually, I'll turn it back into a database to show you what it looked like to start. In a database, I can sort of enforce this to be a person. You would see sort of like people coming in here. These are going to manifest as specific pages, even though I didn't need them to be. So I could sort of open the engineering page in this table, but I don't know why I need to do that. Like I'm just trying to get like two columns to sort of display one thing or the next. So anyway, in here, what I did is I just, I came into turn into a simple table. And I think what this does is it removes the ability for you to sort of click and open the engineering thing as a page, because there's no need for us to do that. I wish the faces would still pop up with these app mentions. Maybe this is something to send to the Notion team as feedback. But you also notice that you lose a bit of the restrictions on the data type, right? So we've got a header row. You can also have a header column. These are listed in the options here in the thing. And so it just provides some bolding and some gray support on the table. So we'll get rid of this. And then, yeah, it's really easy to just add a new column if you want. I can kind of delete this out. There's also just like a dragability thing. So yeah, this is just, I think, a good for situations where you don't have data that you need to manipulate or enforce a specific data type, and you just for display purposes want to have a couple columns or a big matrix to show up on what's going on. So yeah, I think for anywhere that you've got inline databases that you want to transition into simple tables just for display purposes, this is where this really works out.
I think that's exactly how you want to use them, and when you want to use them is even things like listing the top conversion codes for a month. And it's like the top 5 are X, Y, and Z. And here are the conversions. We're not actually worried about some. We're not actually worried about driving revenue. We just want to say it was like number 1 is Mark Hyman, number 2 is Kelly LeVeque, whatever it is, we go down this list. It's like we don't need a data type associated with it, because that isn't a rank order. There is no reason to have data associated with it. And to your point, it's like they don't need pages, but you need in a memo, or you need in some form of documentation, just that simple table. And that's exactly where these tables become much more efficient to use.
Yeah. I think it's important to call out too, you get a lot of benefit of not having like just speed and consumption of not it not being a database. I'll go back to the priorities database and talk specifically about why this one actually does make sense to be a specific database, because we need values filled in for a lot of these things. And we don't want people to sort of like define their own project status. And more to the point, we want people, like, this is the jumping off point to get access about things like guided journey, for example. So this is, deprecated at this point, but there's a lot of detail here where actually opening the sort of the primary column, if you want to call it that, as a page does have benefit to it. So if you expect there to be child pages and you sort of want to enforce it to be inside of a database of sort, then this is going to be the best thing to use.
Thinking about the simple tables, maybe a good heuristic is, if information is transactional and static, then simple table. If it needs to be dynamic, then go for something where you can create more of a database around it.
Yeah, I think that's a good heuristic to go by, for sure.